My name is Leonard, and this is the model viewing software that I've developed for my final year dissertation at the University of Huddersfield. So if we go into the model viewer, you're greeted by the 3D model of the Colt single action army. Now at this point there are three separate touch commands that you can use: the drag, the pinch and the hold. So a free drag at this stage will simply rotate the model along the X and the Y axis. And if you were to press the rotate mode button in the top left hand corner of the screen, it turns into pan mode, whereby you can translate the model wherever you want. So we'll store that. The pinch mechanism zooms in and out of the model to gain greater detail and a much richer display. And the hold function resets the gun to its original orientation. It's very useful for people. I was finding during testing people would throw the model off the screen and rotate it around and they'd have no idea where it was, but by holding the screen they can now restore the model and continue work from where they left off. So the first tab along the top, as you will notice, there are 5 tabs: the data, the view, the parts, the options and the help screen. I will show you the help screen first to gain a greater understanding of the instructions. So the help screen opens, you're greeted with 2 options, either instructions or credits. By choosing instructions, you then gain access to a screen that runs you through the basic touchscreen commands as I've just explained, and a brief rundown of what each of the 4 tabs along the top of the screen do, what their function is, how they change the model and the viewing display. If we go back, you can also access the credit screen, which is a very simple credit to all the people who have worked on the system, including Dave Marsh, who handled the UI design, Chris Frith, who modelled the Colt, Daniel Fitchie and Wes McKinder, who handled the other 2 weapons, the blunderbuss and the Martini Henry respectively, and a narrator by Kira Buckland in the data tab. And there was additional support and a special thanks to Canalside Studios for their help and for their models, and the University of Huddersfield for the guidance they've given me on this project. So we can now begin by going into the data tab. The data tab is essentially the information about the model, its core structure and any other information that can be gained from learning about a Colt single action army or a blunderbuss, a flintlock rifle, a Martini Henry, etc. At the moment there is only the Colt information in, but this can be changed at a later date depending on the model, the name of the model. I took the viewer to the Royal Armouries to have their honest criticism on it, and they told me that you must always develop software for the extremes. So in this case I was worried about people who might be partially sighted or hard of hearing and unable to decipher any information about the model. As a result, I contacted Kira Buckland to narrate some voiceover lines for me, which she happily did.
The Colt single action army is a single action revolver with a revolving cylinder holding 6 metallic cartridges.
Now this continues on for some while. I'll show you the view tab. Now the view tab was originally intended to speed up the process of altering the view and the orientation of the model. So where all of this could be done with touch commands and you can rotate and translate the model and get it into whatever position you want, you can only do one touch command at a time, so it slows down the process quite a lot. By implementing the view tab, I gave users the option of rotating and translating the model with the 2 on-screen thumbsticks and with a zoom bar at the bottom of the page. This allows for a much speedier method of altering the view and orientation of the model. So now the parts tab focuses on 3 aspects to the model viewing software. It allows the user to focus on particular parts of the gun that they would not already have information about. So, for example, if we click on the plunger, the view zooms into that particular mesh on the gun, highlighting it while reducing the transparency of everything else around it, allowing the user to clearly see where each part of the gun is. And we can restore parts from this location to restore the model to its original standing. There also exists parts removal. So if I choose something quite large and obvious to see, such as the cylinder, while you initially click on it, it will focus to that location. You can then click again and it will remove the part from the display of the model, so you can now see inside of the gun at the rest of the cylinder. And again, restoring the parts from here will restore the display of the model. Finally, there exists even more information in the case of a few meshes, whereby selecting them you will be given the option of learning more information, as you can see on the right hand side of the screen. By pressing this button, you're greeted with a small screen that briefly explains what this particular mesh part is and what its role is in the greater scheme of that model. So if we restore parts from here, we restore the view. As now finally I can take you into the options screen, whereby you have a number of options that you can choose to alter your viewing experience of the model viewing software. You can change the model with the 3 along the top of the screen. The SAA Colt is already loaded, so I can show you the blunderbuss. Now this was developed for the original model viewer by Daniel Fitchie, and by clicking the same parts, because the trigger shares the same name as the trigger within the Colt, you gain access to the exact same information, although this can be changed at a later date to be specific to each gun. For example, in the case of the blunderbuss, it has a ramrod part which the other guns do not, and by clicking that you gain unique information about what a ramrod is and how it's used to compress the projectiles at the rear of the barrel. And the final model that can be viewed is the Martini Henry rifle. An important note is that all of the models work in exactly the same way. They all rotate and orientate themselves exactly the same, and the textures are applied in all the same way. So aside from changing the models, you also have the option of entering art mode, which displays the model in its core wireframe structure with a polygon and vertice count along the left hand side. I found this useful when it came to questionnaires and testing my participants, in that if they had no experience in 3D modelling, they would still find this mode interesting. And for 3D modelers themselves, it enables the opportunity to load their models onto the Windows Phone and take them to interviews or to show their other modelling friends, as the system shows how well modelled this particular artifact is. Finally, there is a sensitivity option in the options screen, which alters the sensitivity of both the touch and rotational and translation thumbsticks in the viewer. So with the sensitivity much higher now, the zoom is obviously much sharper, rotation is extraordinarily fast, and the panning is very dramatic. And by lowering sensitivity, all of these options change. So the panning is very slow, very sluggish, the rotation much slower, and the zoom again much slower. And this was to allow the users the option of choosing how quickly or slowly they wanted to run the model viewing software out. And that's it, and I hope you've enjoyed my presentation on the model viewing software, and thank you very much for watching.